timeouts left for Minnesota. Here we go. Conley looking for Edwards. Finally gets it to him. Edwards launches. No! And Denver survives. And they have punched their ticket to the Western semis.
If you're an avid NBA watcher like I am, you probably have an opinion on the Minnesota Timberwolves. Whether that's you love them or you hate them because of some moves they made last offseason, you probably have an opinion. And myself, I'm stuck in a position where the Minnesota Timberwolves are my personal favorite team. And that's because I'm from Minnesota, so I love this team with all of my heart, even if they don't really love me back, and that's fine. It's a hurting relationship, but that's besides the point. In today's video, I want to talk about, from a perspective of a Timberwolves fan, how the Timberwolves can improve going into next season and why this past season was a disappointment in my eyes and the view of a lot of different people. Now, when talking about the 2022-23 Minnesota Timberwolves, the thought process that goes into everybody's head is, well, they traded for Rudy Gobert and they lost in the first round. Same as last year, and actually they were a worse seed. There are obviously a couple different things that need to be talked about because you can't just leave that sentence without context. And first of all, is Karl Towns missing 52 or 53 games this season, which honestly, as a Timberwolves fan, I'm grateful that it wasn't the entire season, because when it happened, I thought it was much worse than a torn calf. I thought it was an Achilles all the way through, but it wasn't that. So obviously, even though it was a little bit of a disappointment, I'm glad that he, recovered and was able to play again in the season. With that being said, Rudy Gobert, on the other hand, had his ups and downs, and that's fine, honestly. It's something that I personally expected coming into the season, adding a big man, running a two big duo, even if it wasn't for as many games as we wanted it to, which also is intriguing to me because we hadn't got to see it really gel, right? We didn't have that gelling period that a lot of teams talk about. Ty Lue always talks about, we have not a lot of gelling because we have new players coming in, old players going out. Seemed like a very similar thing with the Minnesota Timberwolves this year. So going into next season, cautiously optimistic for what this duo could look like. At the same time, I'm cautiously optimistic with the side of caution leaning toward that. So with that being said, I want to talk about what we need to do coming up next season to really improve and really show the league that it wasn't such an awful trade. So with that also being said, let's talk about Naz Reid. I mean, Naz Reid is the GOAT or not. I love Naz Reid. Minnesota fans love Naz Reid. NBA fans love Naz Reid. The Timberwolves need to re-sign Naz Reid because if they don't, I have a really bad feeling about this upcoming season because he was such an essential piece coming off the bench this season, which, if he leaves, I don't see any production coming off the bench unless we see, some magical signing. Jordan Clarkson, I don't know what we could do there because we might struggle really bad next year without the GOAT, Naz Reid. So I want them to re-sign Naz Reid. I need them to re-sign Naz Reid. And I think NBA fans are hoping he doesn't re-sign because a lot of franchises want Naz Reid on their team because he's a very good player, a very underutilized player at times. But when he really gets his shot, there's a reason he's absolutely loved by the fan base. So Naz Reid needs to come back. Naz Reid, please come back. If you hear this, come back, man. And also, the Timberwolves need to re-sign, or rather extend, Anthony Edwards and Jaden McDaniels, which is a thing that's more than likely going to happen. Probably first thing in the offseason, first priority, re-sign those guys. The problem was Jaden McDaniels breaking his hand, so not having him in the playoffs was a problem. But his value was skyrocketing so much when it comes to money that it was like, okay, so we're almost borderline going to have to give this guy a max contract. So he breaks his hand, and that's like, maybe we, don't have to give him as much money, which sucks for him. But as a franchise, you got to think, as a business, you're like, okay, we save a couple dollars here on Jaden McDaniels. Maybe we can, bring in a couple extra guys, see really what can happen. But saving that extra money is going to be important. But obviously, I expect Jaden McDaniels to come back fully healthy and do fantastic things. So, obviously, the playoffs being a little bit of a disappointment, having Jaden McDaniels come back next year and hopefully healthy the entire year will help this franchise really, really expand on what this campaign or this last year's campaign was about, because I feel like there's a lot of potential there. I feel like there's a lot to gain. I feel like there's a lot to learn. And I feel like Jaden McDaniels is a top tier contributor to that. Anthony Edwards, on the other hand, we know what he is. And that's so crazy to me because, his floor is a top 20, top 25 player in the NBA. What is his ceiling being a top 3 player in the NBA? A top 10 shooting guard of all time, top 5 shooting guard of all time, which is so crazy. Being a Timberwolves fan, it feels like we never get players like that. We get Anthony Towns, which great shooter, but I mean, he's not a Joel Embiid, he's not a Nikola Jokic, he's not a Shaq, he's not one of these top tier, absolutely dominant big men, but he's solid, obviously all NBA guy, but we don't quite get those guys like Anthony Edwards where they just have that dog mentality. So I'm super excited to see what he has to come. Obviously, another offseason of him improving is going to be massive for the Timberwolves' success, as well as really seeing, as I've talked about earlier, not only Rudy and Cat and Ant, all of them mixed together. I'm excited to see what Slow-Mo, guys like him, have to offer. I also have the questions of, is Jaylen Nowell going to re-sign? As a Timberwolves fan, I kind of hope he doesn't unless we get him for really cheap. But I don't see that happening. I don't think he wants to be here. So, Jaylen Nowell, goodbye. We need to replace his scoring when he plays okay, right? I mean, he had his off and ons, and he consistently was pretty bad. But he had those games where he was going to provide 20 points or 15 points. And him just leaving, it's going to, take a hit to the bench production. So if we can, as I said earlier, get a Jordan Clarkson, that'd be extremely, extremely helpful. And I'd also like to get Tyus Jones. If there's any way to get that going, I don't know, because the Grizzlies are in a little bit of a tough situation, which I talked about 2 videos ago. So if you guys want to hear my opinions on the Grizzlies, go ahead and watch that video. But that's been my thought process here on the Minnesota Timberwolves coming into next season. What was wrong? Well, we can talk about everything. I mean, it felt like the entire everything, the wheel was broken. They tried to reinvent the wheel, and there wasn't enough time to test the reinvented wheel. So that's my thoughts. That's my opinions on the Minnesota Timberwolves. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. It's been your boy Jelson. Peace.